خادم الحرمين الشريفين بتقديم دعم لتطوير الجيش وقوى الأمن الداخلي وسائر القوى الأمنية الشرعية قوامه $1 مليار.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's headlines. Education Minister Ilyes Boussa yields to the demands of the Syndicate Coordination Committee not to mark the official exams. The Lebanese parliament fails once again to elect a new president due to a lack of quorum. And the UN names experts to an international commission of inquiry into possible human rights violations and war crimes committed during Israel's military offensive in Gaza. Education Minister Ilyes Boussa has yielded to the demands of the Syndicate Coordination Committee not to mark the official exams, hoping a dispute on the wage scale will be resolved by the end of this week. The SEC held a protest near the Education Ministry as part of a general strike aimed at pressuring lawmakers to approve the public sector wage scale amid a showdown with contract teachers on the correction of official exams. A dispute erupted at the protest site between the teachers in favor of correcting the exams and others rejecting to do so. During the protest, several contract teachers entered the Education Ministry building to agree on the needed criteria to mark the exams. The Lebanese parliament has once again failed to elect a new president as it was unable to reach a quorum due to a boycott by the Change and Reform and Loyalty to the resistance blocs. Speaker Nabih Berri has adjourned the parliamentary session aimed at electing a president to September 2nd. Nearly 30 minutes after the voting session was scheduled to begin, there were only 57 MPs present in parliament. And just as before, Berri himself and Prime Minister Tamam Slam did not show up for the session. Lebanese Forces leader Samir Jaja has condemned the parliament's failure to elect a new president for the 10th time and held the March 8 camp responsible for it. During a press conference, he said the elections will be held as soon as MP Michel Aoun alters his position on the polls. He accused the March 8 alliance of seeking to impose Aoun's elections as president. He added the postponement of the polls is a major crime against Lebanon and the highest Christian post in the country, especially given the regional developments. Électricité du Liban contract workers have stepped up their protest, staging a sit-in outside the Ministry of Water and Energy to denounce a decision giving full-time employment to only a portion of them. The protesters gathered at the EDL building, from where they marched to the ministry, shouting slogans rejecting the decision of the EDL Board of Directors to limit the number of employees provided full-time jobs to 891 out of the 2,000 workers. Reports say Energy Minister Arthur Nazarian refused to talk to the protesters, who had cut off the road outside the ministry with burning tires, saying that he will not negotiate under pressure. The committee said it decided to escalate the protest as of Wednesday or tomorrow by staging an open-ended strike and sit-in that will include putting up tents outside the ministry after Minister Nazarian had refused to receive them. The Lebanese army has removed the bodies of 7 militants from the outskirts of Arsal, days after Takfiri fighters withdrew from the border town in East Lebanon following heavy clashes with the army. The national news agency says the bodies believed to belong to militants from Syria's Nusra Front and the Islamic State in Iraq and Greater Syria were found near a quarry at the western entrance of Arsal. At least 60 militants were killed in addition to 19 troops and over 15 civilians in 5 days of clashes triggered by the arrest of a Syrian militant, Ahmad Ahmed al-Jum'a, on August 2nd. In the meantime, a delegation from the Future Bloc visited Arsal to take stock of the damage inflicted on properties and public buildings in preparation for a reconstruction plan to be funded by Future Movement leader Saad Hariri. Hariri, who has returned to Lebanon after over 3 years of self-exile last week, donated $15 million for Arsal's reconstruction. British Ambassador to Lebanon, Tom Fletcher, says his country will support Lebanon in its bid to secure its borders with Syria through the provision of additional equipment and training for the army. Speaking after a meeting with Defense Minister Samir Muqbil, Fletcher said he offered his condolences to the Lebanese authorities for the lives of military personnel lost in the battle against foreign extremists in Arsal, and he underscored support for efforts to bring back personnel held hostage by the militants. Fletcher said Lebanon's allies, including the United Kingdom, should be considering now more than ever before how to support Lebanon's efforts in bolstering stability and sovereignty. He pointed out that he has informed Mukbil of his country's wish to extend additional support to the military in the form of training and equipment to help reinforce monitoring and control of the border. Palestinians were trying to return to a semblance of their normal lives in Gaza as the 72-hour truce entered its second day and negotiators sat down in Cairo to seek a permanent end to hostilities. The enclave was quiet following days of Egyptian brokered mediation to stem violence, which has killed 1,945 Palestinians and 67 on the Israeli side since July 8th. With no reports of violations on either side since midnight on Sunday, shops and businesses started to reopen and people ventured onto the streets of the war-torn coastal region, which is home to 1.8 million Palestinians. In Cairo, Egyptian intelligence mediators were locked in talks with the Palestinian delegation, which they will later relay to Israeli negotiators. The indirect talks started on Monday, with Egypt acting as a go-between for the two sides. The United Nations has named experts to an international commission of inquiry into possible human rights violations and war crimes committed by both sides during Israel's military offensive in the Gaza Strip. Israel responded to Monday's announcement, dismissing the inquiry as a UN Human Rights Council kangaroo court. For its part, Hamas officials said they welcomed the decision to form an investigation committee into the war crimes committed by the Israeli occupation against Gaza and urges its launching as soon as possible. The UN statement said the independent team will investigate all violations of international humanitarian law and international human rights law in the context of the military operations conducted since 13 June of 2014. And coming up next, Oscar-winning actor and comedian Robin Williams is found dead in an apparent suicide. More after the break. Welcome back. A new report by the Human Rights Watch has alleged that the Egyptian security forces' killings of at least 1,000 protesters at the Rabaa al-Adawiya Square sit-in in Cairo last year most likely amount to crimes against humanity. The 195-page report released today found that Egyptian security forces gunned down hundreds of unarmed protesters when they moved in to disperse the sit-in on August 14th. The killings were part of a policy to use lethal force against largely unarmed protesters on political grounds. HRW found and resulted in one of the world's largest killings of demonstrators in a single day in recent history. HRW says that over a dozen senior Egyptian leaders should be investigated for their parts in the protesters' deaths, including Interior Minister Mohammed Ibrahim and current President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who was defense minister at the time. This comes as Kenneth Roth, HRW's executive director, was denied entry into Egypt on Monday along with another senior staff member after being held at Cairo's international airport for 12 hours. They were on their way to Egypt to release the report. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has urged Iraqi Prime Minister-designate Haidar al-Abadi to quickly form an inclusive government while ruling out sending U.S. combat troops to the country. He added that it was important the forces of Iraq are not a personal force defined by one particular sect and sworn to allegiance to one particular leader, but they truly represent Iraq and Iraq's future in broad-based sense. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama said Iraq took a promising step forward with the designation of a new prime minister replacing Nouri al-Maliki.
Over the past few days, American forces have successfully conducted targeted airstrikes to prevent terrorist forces from advancing on the city of Erbil and to protect American civilians there. Kurdish forces on the ground continue to defend their city, and we've stepped up military advice and assistance to Iraqi and Kurdish forces as they wage the fight against ISIL. At the same time, we've continued our daily humanitarian efforts to provide life-saving assistance to the men, women, and children stranded on Mount Sinjar, and deployed a USAID disaster assistance response team to help. Some have begun to escape their perch on that mountain, and we're working with international partners to develop options to bring them to safety. I want to thank in particular the United Kingdom, France, and other countries working with us to provide much needed assistance to the Iraqi people. And meanwhile, our aircraft remain positioned to strike any terrorist forces around the mountain who threaten the safety of these families. But, as I said when I authorized these operations, there is no American military solution to the larger crisis in Iraq. The only lasting solution is for Iraqis to come together and form an inclusive government, one that represents the legitimate interests of all Iraqis, and one that can unify the country's fight against ISIL. Today, Iraq took a promising step forward in this critical effort. Today, President Massoum named a new Prime Minister designate, Dr. Haider al-Abadi. Under the Iraqi Constitution, this is an important step towards forming a new government that can unite Iraq's different communities. Earlier today, Vice President Biden and I called Dr. Abadi to congratulate him and to urge him to form a new cabinet as quickly as possible.
Oscar-winning actor and comedian Robin Williams was found dead on Monday from an apparent suicide at his home in Northern California. He was 63 years old. Officials suspect the death was a suicide due to asphyxia, but the cause of death is still under investigation. Williams, who won an Academy Award for his role as a fatherly therapist in 1997's Good Will Hunting, had been suffering from severe depression recently, according to his publicist Mara Buxbaum. Williams, who introduced his frenetic style on late 1970s TV series Mork and Mindy and had struggled with addiction in the past, had entered a Minnesota rehabilitation center last month to help him maintain sobriety. Fans of Robin Williams gathered at his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to pay tribute to the legendary comedian. Celebrities took to social media to express their sadness over actor Robin Williams' death. Comedian Ellen DeGeneres wrote on Twitter, "I can't believe the news about Robin Williams. He gave so much to so many people. I'm heartbroken." Actor Steve Martin also expressed his grief, tweeting, "I could not be more stunned by the loss of Robin Williams. Mensch, great talent, acting partner, genuine soul." Many others, including Piers Morgan, Miley Cyrus, and Ozzy Osbourne, paid tribute to the late actor. It's an unexpected irony that many of Robin Williams' most memorable roles came in dramas rather than comedies, but no matter how shaded the subject matter, he always found the light or warmth within. The comedy movie Mrs. Doubtfire is one of his classics, and Williams' role in the movie is one his fans shall always remember and never forget. Check it out.
My marriage is not ending, just on hiatus.
To put his family back together, Daniel Hillard needed a job.
Do you have any special skills?
I do voices.
Yeah! Nancy and I are still looking for the other half of my head.
Look at me right now, Moneypenny. I want to undo that bow and get to know you.
Mr. Hillard, do you consider yourself humorous?
I used to.
And a decent home for his kids.
How do you like it?
Can't you just tell Mom you're sorry?
But he found a way.
I'm placing an ad for a housekeeper.
Housekeeper? Could you make me a woman?
To have both.
Wow.
Let's pray.
Hello? Euphigenia Doubtfire.
Papa's got a brand new bag.
He's still the same old dad. Only better.
Dinner is served, madam.
Wow. I'd love to get reacquainted.
Can't you see the lust in that man's eyes?
Accent's a little kind of muddled there.
Really? Well, so's your tan.
The terrorists, they ran that way. It was a run by fruiting.
Surprise.
Robin Williams. Sally Field.
Who needs a husband when I've got you?
In a Chris Columbus film.
Back off!
Mrs. Doubtfire.
God, it's hot in here.
A father's work is never done.
My first day as a woman. I'm getting hot flashes.
A movie definitely worth watching again. And this marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Education Minister Elias Boussab yields to the demands of the Syndicate Coordination Committee not to mark the official exams. The Lebanese parliament fails once again to elect a new president due to a lack of quorum. And the UN names experts to International Commission of Inquiry into possible human rights violations and war crimes committed during Israel's military offensive in Gaza. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again tomorrow. For more, tune in.
وجه خادم الحرمين